Now, it's time to say a very, very good morning to Alex Phillips, who's out in Lanzarote. I was going to say stuck in Lanzarote, but I mean, I can think of worse places to be actually marooned. But you've been there for a very long time, Alex. Very good morning to you.
I have. I came over for a week's holiday at the very start of December because it was in the UK travel corridor, and I was actually supposed to be coming back and spending some time in Talk Towers with you good people. But they took it out of the travel corridor, meaning I'd have to quarantine when I got home. So I thought, oh, I'll extend my holiday. Then we had lockdown. Then all the flights home were cancelled, and well, here I am, about 2 months later,
Well, I
still
mean,
here.
as I said, it could be worse. I mean, you're not missing any great weather here. You're looking very healthy. You're looking as though you're enjoying yourself. But what do you do all day?
Well, it's we've got a sort of semi-lockdown here in Lanzarote where bars and restaurants are now closed at 6 o'clock in the evening. But otherwise, during the daytime, it's life as normal. You can go for a nice little cocktail. You can sunbathe on the beach. There's hiking. I'm going horse riding, paragliding. Just trying to be fit and healthy and appreciate my freedom, I
Very
guess.
nice. Well, you haven't decided to defect to the EU, though, have you?
No, 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 no. Don't worry about that. But when it comes to Lanzarote, I could actually become a Remainer. I do love it here. It's a
Yeah.
gorgeous.
It is. It is lovely, but I tell you what, the Remainers back here have gone a bit quiet. Even Tony Blair threw the EU under the bus the other day because their performance on Friday night was so laughable. I couldn't quite believe what was happening.
I was shocked. I couldn't, I had no words at that time when we found out that they had essentially torn up Section 16 of the Northern Irish Protocol and wanted to stick a hard border there. And, if anything was going to stoke up tensions and return, the island of Ireland to the horrible era of the Troubles, which the EU kept threatening would happen as a result of Brexit, it would be actually denying life-saving medicine to people crossing the border. I mean, that is just insane. If anything was going to pit, one group of people against another, it would be that. So I think everyone was shocked. And it was a matter of hours, wasn't it, before Ursula von der Leyen decided that actually, no, it was an administrative error. She didn't mean to do it. She hadn't informed Ireland. She hadn't informed any member states. And what people are actually saying who are close to her inside the European Commission is, in fact, she acted rather unilaterally. But it was shocking. It was a massive, massive diplomatic error. But that's not it. I mean, remember, of course, she also ordered that production sites and laboratories in Brussels were raided by the police because she got obsessed with the idea that stocks made for the EU were actually going to the UK, which isn't actually true. She went on an attack against Pfizer, trying to prevent them exporting vaccine to the UK, when actually her beef was with AstraZeneca. They lied then about the vaccine not working, and a few minutes later they approved it. They lied about paying research and development to AstraZeneca, which they said, well, we've never received that money. They lied about the nature of the contract and this best endeavours clause.
Right.
It's just, it's the sort of behaviour that international commentators would think would be worthy of Putin on a bad day.
Well, exactly right. And it reminded me as well of what you'd always told me in the past about the way the EU operates in other parts of the world that we don't know so much about, like Africa, for example, where they basically stride in there and demand everything from them and give them very little in return and basically kind of monopolise their way through the entire continent.
Right, yeah, and they do. And actually, that's what they've been trying to do with the UK, because we got our procurement systems in place about 3 months ahead of the EU. We've invested per capita more than any other nation when it comes to vaccine development, and drove a lot of that resource into AstraZeneca, which is the British vaccine, which we're now saying that we will provide to the developing world at cost price. This is going to save billions of lives around the world. And we've quietly got on with pre-ordering a lot of vaccines, some of which haven't come onto line yet. We've ordered about 5.5 times more vaccines than we need for the entire UK population. And we've, rolled our sleeves up quite literally and been getting on with our own jabbing. The EU, however, saying we want to do everything centrally. It's too bureaucratic, it's administratively slow. And as a result, things just didn't get done. So when they then turned around and said to AstraZeneca, right, we want millions of vaccines and we want them now, AstraZeneca said, well, okay, but we can't scale up production to that level to meet that need. And one of the reasons that the EU got themselves into trouble is because at the beginning of all this, they took a very protectionist approach, which is an EU thing to do, and essentially put most of their eggs in German and French baskets. They went heavily for the Pfizer vaccine, which of course can only be stored at minus 70 degrees temperatures, making it logistically very difficult. And then they pinned a lot of hopes on Sanofi, a French pharmaceutical company. And as far as I'm aware, that vaccine is barely out of early stage trials. So they then turned around and said, right, Britain's got a good vaccine. We want it now. And essentially wanted to take our supplies. I mean, it beggars belief.
It really does. And I mean, Ursula von der Leyen is beginning to make old Jean-Claude Juncker look like a very responsible man that never takes too much wine at lunchtime.
Well, as far as I'm aware, she wasn't a particularly popular defence minister back in Germany. I was reading somewhere the other day, actually, that only about 1/3 of various, army supplies actually worked. And at some point, soldiers were actually training with broomsticks instead of guns.
Well, one of the things apparently that she's really useless at is procurement. And clearly that's what's happened with the vaccine as well.
Well, and I think that she likes to talk big. She's for a very petite woman. She likes to sort of, she's got quite sharp elbows, but it doesn't work. You can't turn around and bully a newly independent country and say, our lives are worth more than yours. You've got your vaccine procurement process correct. We haven't. Now give us yours. Oh, in fact, don't give us yours. We're going to go raid laboratories instead. But we're quite lucky that, in fact, where we've procured vaccines, a lot of the production sites, not just those that we are receiving already, but those which we hope are going to come online, a lot of those production sites are in the UK. So we've got one vaccine that's going to be made in Stockton-upon-Tees. We've got another which is hopefully going to be approved soon, which will be made in Livingston in Scotland. So we've actually done quite well to domesticate, if you will, our own supply chain, which is crucially important. And if that's what people want to call vaccine nationalism, then so be it. But I think we've been fleet of foot. We're trying to save lives. And what I think is very admirable is we've turned around and said to the EU, of course we will help you. We must stick to our own commitments first, vaccinate our own population. That's fair. UK taxpayers have paid for these vaccines. We voted for that Prime Minister. This is our system. Yeah. But I don't think French lives or German lives or Czech lives are worth any less than British lives. So absolutely, we must try and help them where we can, because we need as much of the globe vaccinated as possible if we're going to unlock and have normal travel again.
I mean, it was suggested to me, I think, by somebody who called in the other day that perhaps we should hand out some of our vaccines, if we've got spare capacity, to the Commonwealth first before Europe, because obviously if the country's a poorer country, then that might make more sense. But as far as the EU is now concerned, I think she's dealt herself and the EU Commission quite a serious blow, because an awful lot of individual countries are now saying, well, I'll tell you what, we'll take your vaccination handout, but we'll also order more of our own because we don't trust you.
Right, I know. I mean, actually, initially, when she wanted this centrified system, Germany, Netherlands, Italy had started going about doing it themselves, and they got a sharp slap on the wrist and were told stop. And then, of course, she's messed it up, and then the diplomatic kerfuffle that followed. It's hardly showering the EU with glory, and it's amazing, actually, that there has been, for the first time, international outcry about those moves, because often the EU is extremely deft at being able to negotiate behemoth PR disasters. I mean, look at the Eurozone crisis, where they impoverished entire countries, plunged millions of people into unemployment, homelessness even. Removed democratically elected leaders and turned around and said, oh, it's not our fault. It's not the single currency. It's the fault of the banks. And Molotov cocktails were flying through the skies of Athens when the EU got given the Nobel Peace Prize. You couldn't make it up. But this time, I do feel like the mask has slipped. And a lot of questions that people on the continent, those member states in the EU, will be asking themselves right now is, how do we get rid of this woman? Yeah. How do we free ourselves from these problems? And there is rising Euroscepticism across the continent. And not only that, the EU also want to centralise the recovery fund. So when countries are in an economic mess, when we come out the other side of lockdown and they need to bail out businesses, that goes against EU regulations. And the EU is saying, well, we will do this on your behalf, channeled via the European Central Bank, and therefore it won't be illegal to, essentially deploy state aid. But that will come with conditions. And believe me, I think when there's a big economic crisis, especially on the continent, following COVID-19, and the EU are left to handle that, these tensions you're seeing already with cars being set on fire in Rotterdam and the like, I think they're going to explode even more. I think the EU's in for a very, very difficult journey.
Yes, I think so. And also because we're having to kind of address who gets the vaccination next, whether it's police officers or whether it's teachers or whether it's other public sector workers or public sort of service workers. They're going to have to come up with a plan to hand out the vaccines to different countries, and they're going to have to prioritise countries, aren't they?
Right, yeah, and actually what we're seeing at the moment is Spain has had to completely stop its vaccination program for the next 2 weeks because the supply chains have just run dry. And that must be absolutely gutting for people in Spain when they're looking at the news and they can see other countries are vaccinating and they know the reason they're not protecting those people, and with every day lost, lives are being lost that could have been prevented. They must find that utterly galling. At the end of the day, it's almost, you have to be on a war footing to deal with something like a global health crisis. And the EU have proven themselves to be, once again, moving at a glacial pace, far too bureaucratic and far too interested actually in the preservation of itself, of its own raison d'etre, of saying we must be in control of everything rather than doing an effective job.
Yeah, it's been absolutely appalling. As I say, they haven't done themselves any favours. What have you made of what's been going on with the SNP? I was talking to George Pascoe-Watson this morning. Nicola Sturgeon's obviously got an awful lot of problems at home, as it were, but she's kind of using her second referendum for independence and the European Union to try and distract everybody from it. She was one of the few British politicians who didn't castigate the EU on Friday night. What are the EU making of all that?
Well, what's so crazy, actually, is Nicola Sturgeon didn't just not castigate the EU. She started suggesting our vaccines should be sent to Brussels and to be distributed over the continent. I mean, this is the Scottish National Party, which is all about putting Scotland first. They vaccinated fewer people in Scotland than any other country in the United Kingdom. They're really messing this up. We've had to send in the British Army to go and help up there. And now she's saying to people, oh, you know, vote for us, have independence. We're going to give your vaccines to Brussels. Brussels will be in charge of everything you do. I just can't see how the general public are going to fall for that. But I do think you're right, it is a big distraction technique because, you know, what's going on with the Alex Salmond trial is cringeworthy, and her association with that and how much she's brushed under the carpet and how much she knows about what's been going on.
Well, interesting. The story came out yesterday that Peter Murrell, her husband, has decided that he will decline the invitation to speak to the Alex Salmond inquiry, thereby not absolutely giving them the benefit of what it is that he knows and when he knew it, which seems an extraordinary thing. I can't imagine that happening in London.
Well, it's a very murky business, isn't it? And actually, we do need these things publicly aired and addressed when it comes to allegations of serious sexual assault from not just a politician, but a first minister, someone who is actually in charge of government. It's absolutely vital that we understand what's gone on in order to prevent that sort of level of abuse not happening again if that abuse did take place. But it's a massive headache for the SNP and a massive headache for Sturgeon. But she, a bit like the EU, is again someone who seems to be very good at handling a PR crisis. You know, she bangs her little fist on a lectern and the BBC turned every single TV camera onto her. We've had about 2 general elections now where you'd think Nicola Sturgeon was running in every single seat in the UK. You know, she seems to be the media's pin-up girl, but isn't she great? Isn't she effective? Whereas when you actually pop the lid off, you know, what's going on in Scotland, you realise the economy's a mess. They can't do vaccine rollout. She's just, you know, a semi-decent orator. And I think because she's a female as well, you know, the media tend to pander to her and forget actually that she seems rather inept at doing her job.
Yeah, exactly right. And what about the EU's view of Scotland? Because I always say to people that because of the situation in Spain and Catalonia, I can't imagine the EU really granting Scotland independence as an independent nation inside the EU anyway.
It's very difficult because, I mean, the EU would actually look at it from the situation of what's going to help us. Yes, it does create a problem when it comes to the Catalonian referendum, which they decided wasn't legal and valid. And that, you know, it's not so much that the EU would worry about that, but Spain wouldn't like that. A member state of the EU would not like that. But also, if you're going to become a member state of the EU, you have to sign up to the single currency now. You can't just walk in with whatever you're using. And frankly, if Scotland were to become independent, I see no reason why it should make any claims on using the pound. You've got to have, I think, a unified fiscal system, a unified financial system to make a single currency work. So then what would happen if they've got a different currency over the border? If you thought the Northern Irish border situation was difficult, imagine if we suddenly got a border.
I know. It's mad, isn't it? Absolutely mad. Well, it's a great talk to you. Good to see you, Alex. When are you coming back? Are you waiting for the quarantine rules to change at some point?
It's strange. I don't know. I'm just sort of playing it by ear at the moment. There are occasional flights sort of once a week, and I don't see any reason to come home right now because I'd just be stuck inside a house. I'd have to, like you said, quarantine for 2 weeks or something on return. I think I can still get a PCR test and escape after 5 days. But, you know, if they suddenly bring in hotel quarantine, Nightingale hotels, as I think they should be called, then I definitely want to try and avoid that, because I don't want to be fixed with a £1,500 penalty to be kept by armed guard in a sordid little hotel room.
No.
So, just got to try and navigate it. The news is changing every day, so I'll figure out best plan of action as and when.
Good stuff. All right, Alex, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Alex Phillips, former Brexit Party MEP. Sounds like she's having a better time than most of us are, so she's probably doing the right thing out there in the sunshine.